The first and most devastating blow you deliver to a narcissist when you walk away is the destruction of their illusion of control. Control is not just a preference for the narcissist, it is the very structure through which they interpret the world. It allows them to maintain a fragile and carefully curated sense of superiority, and without it, their psychological house of cards begins to tremble. You see, for the narcissist, the people in their lives are not autonomous individuals with their own needs and desires. Instead, they are extensions of the narcissist's ego, pieces on a chessboard to be moved, manipulated, and used to maintain their self-permission. When you walk away, you disrupt that entire framework. Suddenly, they are no longer the puppet master. You've cut the strings. To understand why this is so profoundly unsettling for a narcissist, you must recognize that their identity is fundamentally insecure. Despite their external displays of arrogance and self-assurance, beneath the surface lies an acute and often unspoken fear. The fear of being exposed as weak, unworthy, and unlovable. This fear drives their compulsive need to control others. If they can control how you see them, how you respond to them, and how you behave in the relationship, then they can stave off the terrifying realization that without this control, they may not be as superior as they want to believe. When you stay in the relationship, particularly if you are empathetic and conscientious, you unintentionally validate their illusion of power. Your willingness to endure their manipulation reinforces the belief that they hold sway over your reality. Every time you second-guess yourself because of their gaslighting, every time you prioritize their feelings over your own well-being, you become another proof point in their distorted worldview. And it's important to see that they don't perceive this dynamic as a partnership, it's a game of dominance. They win when you stay ensnared. But the moment you walk away, you dismantle the illusion. In one decisive act, you send a clear and unmistakable message. You do not own me. And that realization is intolerable to the narcissist. Why? Because if you cannot be controlled, it means their power is not as absolute as they believed. It means that the identity they have built, a self-image of being superior and all-powerful, is a facade that can crumble. And here's where it gets even more psychologically interesting. When you walk away, the narcissist cannot simply accept that you left because of their behavior. That would require self-reflection and honest confrontation with the harm they've caused. And narcissists are constitutionally incapable of genuine self-examination. Instead, they experience your departure as a profound narcissistic injury, a wound to their ego that feels like an existential threat. To preserve their sense of superiority, they must immediately distort the narrative. They will label you as weak, disloyal, or unstable, anything to avoid facing the truth that someone under their control chose to break free. But no matter how they rationalize it, the internal damage is done. Losing control means losing the ability to define the story. And for the narcissist, controlling the story is everything. If you leave, you disrupt the script where they are always the hero, the genius, or the victim. And without you playing your designated role, the entire story starts to unravel. This is why you will often see narcissists react with either aggressive rage or desperate attempts to pull you back in. Both reactions stem from the same root, the unbearable realization that their power is an illusion. What makes your departure even more impactful is that it deprives them of the emotional fuel they need to maintain their fragile self-concept. Narcissists survive on attention, whether positive or negative. Your reactions, your distress, even your attempts to reason with them all feed their need for validation. But when you walk away, especially if you do so without engaging in the drama, you starve them of that lifeline. Without your emotional energy to sustain their grandiose image, they are left alone with their own emptiness, and that emptiness is precisely what they have been running from their entire lives. Moreover, when you reclaim your autonomy, you force them to confront the terrifying truth that other people exist outside of their control. This realization fractures their black and white worldview, where they must always be either the superior force or the victim of betrayal. Your freedom exposes their fundamental weakness, their inability to sustain meaningful relationships without manipulation. And that weakness is something they cannot afford to acknowledge. The most profound consequence of your decision to walk away is this. You reveal that they are not as powerful as they pretend to be. In doing so, you expose the hollowness beneath their facade. And this is why leaving a narcissist hurts them more than anything else, not because they love you, but because losing you shatters the illusion they depend on to survive. The truth is, the most powerful statement you can make to a narcissist is to refuse to play their game. Walking away is not just an act of self-preservation. It is a declaration of your inherent worth. And once you recognize your value, you become immune to their manipulation. In the end, your freedom is their greatest defeat. Another profound way that leaving a narcissist inflicts the greatest hurt is through the sudden removal of their emotional supply. This concept, often referred to as narcissistic supply, is not merely about attention. It is the psychological fuel that sustains their fragile and carefully curated sense of self. Narcissists, at their core, are emotionally dependent on external validation. Without a steady stream of admiration, control, or even conflict, their internal sense of identity begins to deteriorate. By walking away, you cut off this supply, leaving them in a state of emotional and psychological depletion. And that absence, your absence, creates a void they are ill-equipped to manage. You must understand that for a narcissist, relationships are not based on genuine intimacy or mutual respect. They are transactional. You are not seen as a person with your own emotional reality, but as a resource, a means to reinforce their sense of superiority and protect themselves from the gnawing insecurity beneath the surface. Every compliment you offer, every time you prioritize their needs over your own, and even the emotional energy you expend defending yourself against their manipulation, all serve one purpose: to feed their insatiable need to feel important and in control. Your presence, whether through love, frustration, or even fear, validates their existence. When you leave, you abruptly sever that flow of energy, and for a narcissist, that withdrawal is nothing short of catastrophic. It is not simply about losing a partner or a relationship. It is about losing the mirror through which they see themselves. Without your reactions, without your attention, they are left alone with the reality they have spent their entire lives avoiding: their own emptiness. This is precisely why a narcissist will go to such extraordinary lengths to keep you entangled, even when the relationship is deeply dysfunctional. As long as you are there, providing them with emotional sustenance, they do not have to confront the truth of who they are. The psychological mechanisms at play here are fascinating. A healthy person derives their sense of identity from within. They know who they are, independent of how others see them. They experience relationships as a means to share and grow rather than as a tool for self-preservation. The narcissist, however, lacks this internal stability. Their sense of self is fragmented and fragile, requiring constant reinforcement from the outside world. This means they are perpetually seeking sources of validation to hold themselves together. And when you walk away, you are not just ending a relationship, you are dismantling the very structure they rely on to maintain their self-image. This is why their reaction to your departure is often so extreme. Some will lash out in anger, an explosive attempt to gain control by punishing you for daring to leave. Others will resort to manipulation, using guilt, charm, or even pity to pull you back in. But make no mistake, this desperation is not rooted in love or genuine remorse. It is rooted in their fear of being left without the emotional fuel they require to maintain their facade. And the more independent and self-assured you are when you leave, the greater the injury to their ego. What is especially devastating for the narcissist is the realization that you are no longer under their influence. When you stay, whether through hope, fear, or obligation, you reinforce their belief that they hold power over you. But the moment you walk away, particularly if you do so with clarity and finality, you shatter that illusion. And for someone whose entire identity is built around the need to dominate and control, this loss of power is unbearable. It is a blow to the very core of their being, revealing the painful truth that they are not as omnipotent as they believe themselves to be. Even more painful for the narcissist is the knowledge that you are moving on without them. Your ability to reclaim your life, to rediscover joy, purpose, and meaning outside of their influence directly challenges the narrative they have constructed. It suggests that their power was never as absolute as they imagined. And nothing wounds the narcissistic psyche more than the sight of someone they once controlled thriving in their absence. It forces them to confront the reality that they are neither indispensable nor as special as they want to believe. Ironically, the more they try to diminish or destroy you, the more your departure highlights their weakness. A secure and whole person does not need to control others to feel valuable, but the narcissist's aggressive reaction to your freedom reveals just how much of their self-worth was tethered to your presence. And when you refuse to engage, when you walk away without seeking revenge or offering explanations, you deliver the ultimate message. I no longer need you, and I am free. This freedom, your freedom, represents everything the narcissist fears most. It is a living testament to their inability to break you. And the deeper truth is this: by leaving, you do not just hurt them, you expose them. You reveal to the world and to themselves the profound emptiness they work so hard to conceal. And that exposure is the one thing they cannot bear. So when you walk away, understand the power of what you are doing. You are not just escaping a toxic dynamic. You are reclaiming your autonomy. You are declaring in no uncertain terms that your worth is not determined by someone else's perception of you. And in that act of self-liberation, you deliver a wound to the narcissist's ego that nothing else can match. Because at the end of the day, the greatest pain you can inflict on a narcissist is to live fully and freely without them. Another profound reason why leaving a narcissist hurts them more than anything else lies in the reality that your departure exposes the lie they have worked tirelessly to maintain, the illusion of their superiority and control. For the narcissist, power over others is not just a desire, it is a psychological necessity. Their sense of self is built on the belief that they are exceptional, that they are the ones in charge, and that others are merely players in the grand narrative they construct to sustain this fragile identity. When you walk away, you dismantle that illusion in a way nothing else can. The narcissist's entire psychological framework revolves around the maintenance of a false self, a grandiose image they present to the world. This false self is carefully curated to hide the deep sense of inadequacy they carry, though they may never admit to themselves that it exists. To protect this illusion, they need people around them who reinforce their perceived superiority and validate their control. Relationships are not based on mutual respect or love, but are instead arenas in which the narcissist can exercise dominance and reaffirm their inflated self-image. When you stay, even if you resist or push back against their manipulation, you so serve as a reflection of their power. Your presence alone reinforces their belief that they are the dominant force in the relationship. But the moment you leave, especially if you do so decisively and without fanfare, you tear down the narrative they have been building. You show, through action rather than words, that they are not as powerful as they want to believe. And for someone whose identity hinges on the idea that they are untouchable, this is a deeply destabilizing realization. It is important to understand that narcissists cannot tolerate being perceived as weak or vulnerable. Their emotional lives are structured to avoid those feelings at all costs. So, when you walk away, you force them to confront the limits of their control. And because they lack the emotional maturity to process that reality, they experience it as a profound injury, a narcissistic injury, to use the psychological term. This is not just about losing a relationship, it is about the crumbling of the very identity they have worked so hard to defend. The exposure of their limitations does something even more destructive. It strips away their ability to shape the narrative. Narcissists are obsessed with controlling how others see them. They engage in manipulation not only to dominate you, but also to craft a version of themselves that appears flawless. As long as you remain in their sphere of influence, they can manage that image. But once you leave, especially if you refuse to engage in their attempts to pull you back, they lose their grip on the story. You become an uncontrollable factor, an undeniable proof that their power has limit. And here is the key psychological reality. Without someone to validate their superiority, the narcissist is left alone with the truth they work hardest to escape, that at their core, they are not special, not powerful, and not in control. This truth is intolerable for them because their entire psychological structure is designed to avoid it. Your departure forces this truth into view, and they cannot bear it. The reaction to this exposure is often extreme. Some will lash out in anger, desperate to regain control through intimidation or emotional manipulation. Others will attempt to undermine your sense of reality by rewriting history, insisting that the relationship was never as bad as you claim, or that you are to blame for its failures. But these are not signs of strength. They are the panicked responses of someone who cannot face the truth. And the more composed and resolute you remain, the more powerless they feel. In the face of your absence, the narcissist's carefully crafted facade begins to fracture. They may seek out new sources of validation, new relationships, new admirers. But the void left by your departure is not so easily filled, because deep down, they know that someone who truly believed in their superiority would never have left in the first place. Your choice to walk away is proof that their power is not absolute, and this realization eats away at the foundation of their self-permission. The deeper irony is that the harder they try to erase or replace you, the more they reveal how much your departure affected them. A truly secure person does not need to chase those who leave, but the narcissist's relentless attempts to reassert their dominance only highlight their dependence on the people they claim to control. Your absence is like a mirror held up to their deepest fear. The fear that without someone to manipulate, they are nothing. And so, by leaving, you deliver the most profound blow a narcissist can experience. You expose their inability to control you, to define you, and ultimately to sustain the illusion of their invincibility. In doing so, you reclaim your autonomy, not just in the practical sense, but on a psychological level. You prove both to them and to yourself that their power was always an illusion, and there is no greater injury to the narcissistic psyche than that. When you walk away, you do more than escape their manipulation. You dismantle the very structure they use to shield themselves from reality. And in that act, you deliver a truth they cannot ignore. Their power over you was never as complete as they believed. And that truth, once revealed, can never be undone. Another reason why leaving a narcissist hurts them more than anything else lies in the profound sense of rejection it delivers. For most people, rejection is painful, but for a narcissist, it is catastrophic. This isn't merely about feeling hurt or disappointed. It's about the collapse of the carefully constructed self-image they rely on to navigate the world. At the core of narcissism is a fragile and deeply wounded sense of self, a part of them they keep hidden beneath layers of grandiosity and control. When you walk away, you shatter the illusion that they are indispensable, invincible, and above reproach, and nothing terrifies them more than that. The narcissist's entire sense of worth is externalized. Unlike someone with a stable sense of self who derives value from internal qualities like integrity, compassion, and personal growth, the narcissist depends on others to reflect back a sense of importance. They seek admiration, attention, and validation to fill the void within them. This is why they invest so much effort into controlling how others perceive them. As long as they can maintain the image of superiority, they can avoid confronting their inner emptiness. When you leave, you disrupt that cycle in a way nothing else can. You deliver an undeniable message. You are not as powerful as you think, and you are not worthy of my presence. It is one thing for a narcissist to face criticism while still holding the reins of a relationship. They can dismiss your concerns, twist the narrative, or manipulate your emotions to reassert control. But when you remove yourself entirely, they lose the ability to redefine reality in their favor. Your absence becomes a statement they cannot ignore or manipulate, that you no longer find them valuable enough to remain. And here's the psychological twist. Rejection does not simply hurt the narcissist's feelings. It destabilizes their entire identity. In their minds, being rejected is synonymous with being worthless. This is why they often react to rejection with such intensity, whether through rage, attempts to pull you back, or efforts to smear your reputation. They are not simply angry that you left. They are fighting to preserve the illusion that they are the ones in control and that their value is unquestionable. This response is rooted in what psychologists call narcissistic injury, a profound wound to the narcissist's self-esteem that occurs when their inflated self-image is threatened. Most people experience rejection as painful but manageable. They reflect, learn, and eventually move forward. But for a narcissist, rejection reopens the original wound, the core belief buried deep and denied forcefully, that they are fundamentally unlovable. It forces them to confront a truth they have spent their lives avoiding, that their worth is not inherent, and without someone to mirror their grandeur, they are nothing. What makes rejection by walking away so devastating is that it denies the narcissist any form of closure on their terms. If you were to stay and argue, they could twist your words and convince themselves that you're still emotionally invested. If you leave quietly but firmly, you deprive them of the opportunity to manipulate the situation. It leaves them with no narrative to hold on to, just the cold, undeniable reality that you chose to live a life without them. In many ways, this is why narcissists often attempt to hoover people back into their orbit after a breakup. The term hoovering describes their relentless efforts to reestablish contact, whether through apologies, promises to change, or even threats and guilt. But their goal is not to reconcile out of genuine love or remorse. It is to erase the humiliation of rejection and restore their sense of power. If they can pull you back in, even for a moment, it reassures them that they are still significant, still in control, and still capable of bending reality to their will. But what happens when they fail? When you refuse to re-engage, to argue, or to explain yourself, the narcissist is left with nothing but the echo of their own emptiness. They are forced to sit with the realization that someone they once controlled no longer finds them worth the effort. And because their entire identity is built on external validation, this kind of rejection is intolerable. It is also why they often react with such vitriol after being left. They may attempt to destroy your reputation, spreading lies to mutual friends, colleagues, or even on social media. This isn't just spite, it's an attempt to rewrite the story. If they can make you the villain, they can avoid facing the truth that your departure signals a profound failure on their part. But deep down, no matter how much noise they make, the reality remains the same. You walked away, and they could do nothing to stop you. Ultimately, walking away delivers a message the narcissists cannot escape, that their power is limited, their worth is conditional, and their control over others is not as absolute as they desperately need to believe. And because their entire psychological framework is built on the denial of these truths, your decision to leave is more than just an act of self-preservation. It is a direct blow to the foundation of their fragile identity. By refusing to engage, by removing yourself from their sphere of influence, you force them to face the reality they've spent their entire lives trying to outrun. And perhaps the most devastating truth of all for a narcissist is this: no matter how much they try to control others, they cannot stop someone who has decided to walk away. That is the one form of power they will never possess, and it is precisely why your departure wounds them so deeply and permanently. Another reason why leaving a narcissist hurts them more than anything else is that it forces them to confront their deepest fear, the loss of control. For the narcissist, control isn't just a preference or a means of managing relationships. It is the core mechanism through which they maintain their fragile sense of self. Without the ability to control you, your emotions, your perceptions, and ultimately your behavior, they are left exposed to the chaotic and painful reality they've spent their entire lives trying to avoid. And nothing is more threatening to their identity than that. To understand why this loss of control is so devastating, you must first recognize that narcissists are not motivated by love, connection, or genuine intimacy. Those things require a level of vulnerability they simply cannot tolerate. Instead, their relationships are built on a transactional model where the other person is a tool, a means to regulate their unstable self-esteem. Every interaction is a chess game designed to keep them in the position of dominance, whether through manipulation, guilt, or flattery. When you stay within their orbit, you validate this position of superiority, reinforcing the illusion that they are in charge. But the moment you walk away, that illusion collapses. You demonstrate in the most undeniable way possible that their influence over you is limited. And for someone who builds their identity on the ability to manipulate and control, this is not just a minor injury. It is a catastrophic blow. Without you there to mirror back the image they want to see, the narcissist is left to confront a terrifying reality. They do not have as much power as they believed, and without external validation, they are nothing. What's particularly important here is that the narcissist's need for control is not a surface-level trait. It's not just about getting their way or feeling important in the short term. It's a defense mechanism rooted in profound emotional insecurity. Deep down, often beyond their own conscious awareness, narcissists are plagued by feelings of worthlessness and shame, but instead of confronting these feelings and integrating them in a healthy way, they construct a false self, an idealized image of perfection and superiority. This false self is a fragile mask, one that must be constantly reinforced by controlling others. When you leave, you threaten the very foundation of that mask. You become living proof that their power is not absolute and that truth is intolerable to them. This is why many narcissists will go to extraordinary lengths to reassert control after being left. Whether by attempting to manipulate you back into the relationship, spreading lies to damage your reputation, or engaging in other forms of emotional retaliation. These behaviors are not driven by love or a genuine desire for reconciliation. They are desperate attempts to regain the power they feel slipping through their fingers. But here's the irony. The more they try to reestablish control, the more they reveal just how little control they actually have. The narcissist's entire persona is built on the illusion of superiority, of being above the petty insecurities and vulnerabilities that plague ordinary people. Yet, when faced with rejection, they often unravel. The calm, confident mask is replaced by rage, desperation, and erratic behavior. This breakdown is not just an emotional reaction, it's a crisis of identity. Without control over you, they are forced to confront the reality they have spent a lifetime denying, that they are not omnipotent, that they are not beyond rejection, and that their worth is not self-evident. And this is why your departure is so profoundly damaging. By walking away, you refuse to play their game. You deny them the emotional feedback they need to maintain their false self. You disrupt the carefully curated narrative they've built about who they are and how the world works. And most importantly, you expose the truth they fear most, that their control is an illusion, and without it, they are nothing. It's worth noting that this loss of control doesn't just affect the narcissist in the immediate aftermath of a breakup, it lingers. Long after you've moved on, the fact that they could not prevent your departure remains a wound to their fragile ego. They may attempt to rewrite the story to convince themselves and others that they discarded you, that you were never important. But deep down, they know the truth, and that truth eats away at them because it represents a fundamental contradiction to the narrative they rely on to maintain their psychological stability. What makes this reality even more painful for the narcissist is that the loss of control is irreversible. Once you've recognized their manipulation and chosen to walk away, they cannot undo that awareness. They may attempt to pull you back in to recreate the old dynamics, but something has shifted permanently. You've seen behind the mask. And once you've seen the truth, you can't unsee it. In the end, leaving a narcissist is the one act that strikes at the heart of their greatest fear. It exposes the lie they tell themselves, that they are always in control, always superior, always the one with the upper hand. It forces them to confront a truth they would do anything to avoid, that their power is not absolute, and without someone to dominate, their carefully constructed identity falls apart. And perhaps the most powerful thing to understand is this: by walking away, you reclaim your power. You step out of the illusion they've woven around you and affirm that your worth is not defined by their approval or manipulation. In doing so, you not only break free from their control, you also deliver a blow from which they may never fully recover. Because in the end, no matter how much they try to convince themselves otherwise, the simple fact remains you chose to leave and they were powerless to stop you.